Hello and a warm welcome to the intersection of politics and money. You're watching Political Capital with me, Karabole Tata. We are coming to you from just outside the State Capture Commission that's looking into undue influence that the Gupta brothers exerted and whether or not former President Jacob Zuma really did use his executive powers to influence the awarding of the contract towards the Gupta brothers, which saw them become multi-billionaires in a space of 10 years. So, who are the Guptas?
Once upon a time, a plane took off from India carrying brothers who would write a chapter in African history. It carried the Gupta brothers, Ajay the eldest, Atul and Rajesh the youngest, often known as Tony. It was 1993 and South Africa was on the cusp of freedom. Their father, back in India, encouraged the brothers to go and set up in the new South Africa, claiming it was going to be an economic powerhouse, a new United States in Africa. On the ground, the brothers started small with a computer assembly and distribution business called Sahara Computers. Their wealth grew, and so did their influence. They soon had a very big friend in a very high place, the head of state, President Jacob Zuma. It helped them wield powerful influence that paved the way to lucrative contracts. It was also the key to the ear of those running the country. The brothers worked hard and expanded their operations. They went into mining and made vast acquisitions. JIC Mining Services, Shiva Uranium and Tegeta Exploration and Resources, Optimum Coal Mine and Koenfontein Coal Mine. This portfolio diversified to the spoken and written word, the New Age newspaper, an ANN7 TV station. The influence was growing, and so was the cash. The whole lot generated revenue of $225 million in 2016. But controversy was coming. The whispers about the Gupta influence rose to screams when the family landed a private plane at the restricted military Vatukloof Air Base near Johannesburg. Suddenly, they were on the front pages of all the newspapers. More so because the private plane was not carrying government officials, but merely guests for a Gupta family wedding at nearby Sun City Resort. It all began to go wrong for the Guptas in 2016. Former public protector Thuli Madonsela's State of Capture report sought to unravel alleged improper and unethical conduct by President Jacob Zuma amid his contentious relationship with the Gupta family. With the change of guard in the president's office, it became increasingly uncomfortable for the Guptas in South Africa. It is believed they took off for Dubai. Investigators are on their tail. In recent weeks, the Hawks, South Africa's FBI, swooped on a Gupta-connected project in South Africa's Free State, a multi-million-dollar project to help poor people raise cows that didn't really work out. The investigations continue.
And these investigations have been going on leading up to the Zondo Commission. Here's a clip from Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo himself on the terms of reference.
Whether and to what extent and by whom attempts were made through any form of inducement or for any gain of whatsoever nature to influence members of the national executive, including deputy ministers, office bearers, and/or functionaries employed by or office bearers of any state institution or organ of state or directors of the boards of SOEs. In particular, the Commission must investigate the veracity of allegations that former Deputy Minister of Finance, Mr. Mcebisi Jonas, and Ms. Mentor were offered cabinet positions by the Gupta family. 1.2. Whether the president had any role in the alleged offers of cabinet positions to Mr. Mcebisi Jonas and Ms. Mentor by the Gupta family as alleged. 1.3. Whether the appointment of any member of the national executive, functionary and/or office bearer was disclosed to the Gupta family or any other unauthorized person before such appointments were formally made and or announced? And if so, whether the president or any member of the national executive is responsible for such conduct.
The commission is expected to carry its work over the next 2 years. But over the next 6 months, some intense witnesses will be on stand here to recall what is going on inside the dirty laundry of government. Here are some of them. Jacob Zuma's name is likely to come up a lot. The former president will be challenged over breaches of the executive code. It's not clear whether or not he will testify, but he has been invited. Themba Maseko, the former head of government communication, who was asked by Zuma to assist the Guptas. Fakey Mento, the ANC MP who was offered a cabinet job. Then the star witness, Mcebisi Jonas, the former Deputy Minister of Finance, who says that he was offered a 600,000 rand bribe to take over the post of Finance Minister. All these findings in this inquiry could lead to prosecutions. But on the second day of the commission, the star witness was a Treasury veteran. Willis Dlamini-Zuma is a 15-year veteran inside Treasury who now occupies the position of Chief Procurement Officer. Of course, procurement is what really has led us here to the heart of the State Capture Commission. It is that which will determine if any discretions were made and any deviations from original contract that favored the Gupta brothers. And here's a part of his testimony.
Back to the question of enforcement. What do you then do where you have found deviations that are outside of the prescripts of National Treasury? Consequences.
Before you answer, Mr. Matebula, just so that in case somebody has done something, then they know it's working. Right now I can hear you very well.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, you may answer.
It's enforcement consequences. We go back to that question.
Yeah.
What happens to those transgressors?
You know, it's one area, Chairperson, because when we report to Parliament, and then Parliament plays its oversight role, you may have seen that a number of these entities and government departments over the last while have been appearing before Parliament for consequence management, because that's what Parliament is there for, to play the oversight role. We go to Parliament, of course, to support Parliament in its work when these departments and entities are hauled before Parliament to answer to some of these things as we speak. It's an ongoing process to make sure that there are consequences.
Again, I simply go back to the State Tender Board because it's a regime that we had and that one can use just to compare where we are. Variations of contracts, deviations. How were those dealt with in that, under that regime? And you can see my train of thought is I'm already thinking, is there anything that this commission can recommend in terms of strengthening and improving the prevailing framework?
Thank you, Chair. The State Tender Board, as indicated, also did deal with contract variations, but to reasonable degrees. Because the board would simply say, okay, if there is an application for a variation of a contract, firstly, the board would ask questions. Why was there variation in the first place? Because government departments are supposed to plan. So you know, lack of planning, of course, should not be used as a reason for varying contracts. So it dealt with those issues, but very carefully, in the sense that the State Tender Board would simply say, okay, we're giving you a variation, but based on certain conditions that institutions have to apply, to comply with. I know they would, for instance, they would say, we're giving you this on a month-to-month basis, but not exceeding X amount of period. So within that period, so in other words, your contract extension should be on a month-to-month basis, but not exceeding X period. If for whatever reason, departments failed to comply with that, they could either come back to the board, provide reasons, or the contract expires, and then the department would be sitting without, and then they were given what we call delegated powers, where they could procure through their own delegated powers, which of course were delegated to them by the State Tender Board, pending the finalization of their own contracts. And the board would always follow some of these contracts, because remember, all procurement was under the auspices of the Tender Board. So there was a record of what has happened, what decisions were taken, have those decisions been implemented, etc., etc. But that was the position in that particular. So again, the delegated powers within which government departments had to comply with conditions set by the State Tender Board had thresholds, had limits in terms of thresholds. The board would say, okay, we're delegating you, but not more than, as an example, 750,000. But those thresholds were set out quite clearly in the prescripts of the State Tender Board.
What I understand you to be saying is that there were much tighter controls, really, probably because the State Tender Board system was centralized, and it was easier to then monitor and tighten controls over spending. Or would that not be a fair summation?
Look, Chair, I think in hindsight, when one looks back, the current, the existing framework is now in the system for more than 10 years. I think we introduced this in 2003. We are now in 2018, so we're talking 15 years at least of the current procurement framework. I'm sure one can always, in hindsight, said, yes, perhaps there was a reason to stay with the State Tender Board, but I cannot say convincingly that the board also did not have these elements, because there were also allegations against certain board members and their influence in terms of where procurement contracts should be going to. I think that's one of the reasons to say now, based on these, because these are board members, of course, and they live within communities, and they are not immune to, they were not immune at that time to some kind of influence, as is happening currently today. So, but at least there was some level of control at the time. Apart from the fact that the service delivery was very, very slow. And I think that's quite important. Service delivery was impacted negatively, quite negatively, and quite very, very slow in terms of the decisions of the board.
From one burning issue in South Africa to another, land. What is the cost of land expropriation without compensation on agricultural lender, the Land Bank? I sit down with the CEO on the other side of this.